candle back!
Welcome to the Hollywood in Toto podcast, the right take on entertainment. The HiT cast offers a weekly look at Hollywood from a conservative point of view. Sick of media bias infecting Hollywood headlines? Tired of stars insulting your views? HiT has your back. Now, here's your host, Christian Toto.
Welcome to episode 133 of the Hollywood in Toto podcast, the right take on entertainment. This week we're talking with Karol Markowicz, a must-read columnist from the New York Post. We talk about her fascinating background, how she became an in-demand pundit, and her take on the poison that is cancel culture. On a personal note, I recently joined the Daily Wire as a regular contributor. Now, HollywoodandToto.com isn't going anywhere, nor is this podcast. It's just another way I can share my views on Hollywood. So I hope you'll give my Daily Wire pieces a look. Well, Rambo's back for one last time. We think. You never know with Sylvester Stallone. Rambo Last Blood hits theaters without many critics getting a sneak peek at the fifth film in the franchise. Sadly, that means me too. I didn't get a chance to screen it before it aired. But some critics did see it just before it opened, and their comments are exactly what I predicted weeks ago when the story's plot first leaked. It's racist, as Tin Bongino might say. Rambo Last Blood finds John Rambo battling a Mexican drug cartel after they kidnap a young woman he's come to know like a daughter. That daughter is of Mexican descent. So is the woman in John Rambo's life now, and a journalist who helps him take out the trash. But that's not enough for woke critics, who comprise the majority of the critical community in 2019. The fact that Rambo takes down the cartel, people of color, in what everyone says is a very bloody fashion, is problematic and xenophobic and racist. Aren't we exhausted by this approach by now? Mexican drug cartels exist. They kill innocent people, sometimes in the most gruesome way possible. They engage in sex trafficking, too, another absolutely horrific crime. You're allowed to capture all that on the big screen. And more importantly, your vigilante hero, especially if his name is Rambo, can take them down any way he wants. And if you're a critic who doesn't believe in vigilante violence, cool. You can still remove that part of it from your review. After all, do you assume that all your readers agree with all of your cultural points? That's silly, right? They just want to know if a film is worth their time or not. That's your job. Start doing it. Now, Rambo fans are going to ignore all these woke scolds, I bet. But we'll soon see how much enthusiasm remains for a character who came of age in the 1980s and has an actor in it who's 73 at the moment. Long live Sylvester Stallone. Rambo Last Blood is another reminder that the critical community is as woke and biased as mainstream news reporters. What a shame. And now here's the HiT tweet of the week. This week's winner is a HitCast favorite. I can't stop going back to her, the divine Miss M. Yes, Bette Midler isn't just a versatile actress, she's also an amateur climatologist. This week she's weighing in on the children who are warning us about global warming. Here we go. Skip school and strike. The ones with the most to lose take matters into their own hands since the elders are incapable, apathetic, or just plain stupid. Oh, come on, Bet. Not all of your climate hysteria tweets are stupid.
Don't touch that dial. You're listening to my daddy's podcast.
My HiT tip of the week is Haunt. The new horror film is so basic, so cabin-in-the-woodsy, stale, you'll be tempted to avoid it. Well, don't do that. Some college-age kids are trying to celebrate Halloween in style, and of course that means going to a haunted house. But on the way to one haunted house, they see a sign for another haunted house that looks creepy and gritty and hardcore. How could they resist, right? Well, you don't need me to tell you that this house's haunts are real, and that's where the fun begins.
I just want to get out of here. We just want to leave.
The writing team behind A Quiet Place, last year's smash hit, created Haunt. It's an old-school treat with plenty of surprises. It's not as bloody as some horror films, which is A-okay with me, but the tension is real and so are the scares. This is a movie that You just think you see what's coming next, but you don't. Lots of surprises, lots of feints. I love that in a horror film. Maybe I've seen too many, but when a horror film can really kind of sneak up on you and zig when you expect it to zag, that's a good film. Now, if Haunt isn't playing in a theater near you, you can still get it. Just watch it online or on your TV via your favorite video on demand service. It's a perfect way to kick off the Halloween season.
You're listening to the Hollywood in Toto podcast, the right take on entertainment.
Karol Markowicz keeps popping up on my Twitter feed. That was my first clue she was someone worth following and getting to know better. Karol's astute columns from the New York Post caught my attention again and again. Her musings on Hollywood, cancel culture, and the political scene at large really got me hooked on her work. Every new column became a must-read for me. So, of course, I'm selfish. I wanted to feature her here on the HitCast. Smart voices are worth our while, and Karol's take on modern living is a sound investment. She's also a savvy businesswoman, which is something I didn't expect, but we talk about at length in this conversation. It isn't easy being a pundit in 2019. There's a lot of people sharing a lot of different opinions out there. How do you monetize it? How do you make a career out of it? Well, Karol has done just that, and she explains how. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Karol Markowicz. Well, Karol, welcome to the show. Now, plenty of people read your columns, love your columns, but I don't know if everyone knows about your backstory, and you kind of hint at it in your Twitter profile, but can you fill in a few blanks for us and where you grew up and how you came to America?
Yeah, I was born in the Soviet Union, and I came to the U.S. when I was a little under 2 years old. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, in the Russian community there. So my first language was Russian, and I went to school not speaking any English. I occasionally post a first day of school picture of myself where I have a note attached to me. I'm a lifelong New Yorker. I've lived in a bunch of other places, but I consider myself very New York centric.
And yet there's not a hint of an accent. You can't say coffee. So
Really?
I may have to throw a flag in this.
I don't know. When I lived in Georgia, all of my roommates and friends there thought I had such a thick New York accent. So it's hard. Sometimes it comes out, I guess.
That's funny because I actually grew up on Long Island, and when I went to school in Virginia, my roommates had a field day with my accent for about 3 or 4 months. So it's kind of gently gone away. But obviously now you're a professional columnist, and just given the way journalism works, it's extremely weird to be a journalist today. It's hard to make a career. There are different outlets that are shrinking or dying. Was there sort of a magic moment for you that helped you get here to this place, or was it sort of a kind of a slog to kind of prove yourself and get out there and kind of show that you can do what you do?
It's interesting because I have a few moments that stick out to me. I always plan to write about this, but I started out as a blogger back when blogging was a big thing, and my blog was called Alarming News, and it was sort of a medium-sized blog. I wouldn't call it big, but it was big for New York. Like I would get recognized in different at different political events, which I feel like almost happened more then than happens now. Maybe I just had more pictures on my blog at the time. So it became sort of a place that New York right of center people went to congregate and talk. And I had a day job. I was a paralegal. I wasn't planning to be a journalist or go into politics or anything like that. But my blog just kept getting bigger, and I sort of found that I was really enjoying it, and I decided to go back to graduate school, get my political science master's, and go work on campaigns. And from there, it expanded even more because while I was on these campaigns, including the George W. Bush campaign in 2004, I was blogging. And so people around the country started reading what I was writing, and it just took off from there. My first paying job as a writer was for public radio in New York. I was writing for their website, and I was kind of their token conservative. And what would happen was somebody would, we'd have these blog posts on their site, and somebody would write a blog post and get like 4 comments, 5 comments. I would write one and I'd get like 50, and they'd be mostly angry people saying, I will never fund public radio ever again if you get rid of this woman. But they kind of liked it because the traffic was definitely there for my pieces, and it's sort of
they know they wouldn't go through with their threat too, so that was probably nice as well.
Right. Potentially, right.
Yeah.
It was a less contentious time. But yeah, and it sort of took off from there. My eventual editor at the New York Post saw something I wrote for WNYC and said, why don't you write for us instead? And in October, it will be 8 years that I'm with the Post. So
that's amazing. Now, I'm not dismissing your talent at all because I love your stuff, but there are talented writers out there who don't break through, who don't make a name for themselves. Is there anything maybe you learned early in your blogging career that helped you either from a marketing point of view or just sort of a pragmatic point of view?
I think for one thing, it's a lot of it is luck. Look, I can't say that it's not. A lot of it is people discovering you and wanting to help you. And so I think I am very diligent in doing the same for other writers. When somebody asks me for a connection or a name of an editor or an email address of someone to pitch their pieces to, I'm very quick to give all of that up. I love sharing information with other writers. There were just so many people along the way that helped me out. I think it's just part of what has to happen. Like somebody has to help you in different ways. I just am thinking like Ala Pundit on Twitter was linking to my stuff a lot. He was a very, very big blogger. Ace of Spades also. He and I had a radio show, and they both helped me out a lot. Michelle Malkin let me guest blog on her site back in the day, and that took off in a big way. So I think like there were just a lot of people at the start of my blogging life who helped me a lot. And then once I became a writer, kind of professionally, I think I've had some really amazing editors, Seth Mandel and Sora Mamari and Mark Cunningham at the New York Post. They have all been gigantic helps to me. So I think yes, you're absolutely right that talent is a lot of times not enough. I'm very social. I like to put people together. I'm always connecting people. I think that is definitely also helped me a lot in my life, where I'm willing to connect other people, and so they're willing to do that for me. And that's definitely a piece of advice I would give to writers: just meet as many people as you can.
Yeah, this is all excellent wisdom. And just a quick note: I read a book a few years ago called Utility, Y-O-Utility, from Jay Baer, and he kind of touches on some similar themes. So I recommend that book, and I also definitely recommend what you're going through, because I think it's really a key part of the puzzle. A lot of your columns deal with pop culture, but they can be straight political think pieces as well. When you're working on something, is there a driving force, or is there anything that says, I need to write about this, or like I haven't written an entertainment piece in a few weeks, let me kind of go in that direction? What sort of propels you at any given moment?
A lot of times I pay attention to what I'm most interested to tweet about, because I think another thing that writers do a lot these days is give up all their best stuff on Twitter. Mm-hmm. So before I want to tweet a tweet storm about something, I think, can I make this a column? Because that would be better. And sometimes no, sometimes I can't. And then I just do the tweet storm anyway. But I would say that writers should pay attention to what motivates them on Twitter, and then try to turn that into work that pays, instead of giving it up for free on Twitter like we all do sometimes.
It's also great. You can kind of see if a subject has legs, if it connects with people, and maybe just kind of tease it on Twitter. If there's a huge response, then you kind of swing back and say, hey, I'm going to write a column about this, because obviously it's kind of a proof of concept, I think is the technical term for that.
Yeah,
but,
right, exactly.
You wrote a recent
Twitter's
column.
very good.
You wrote a recent column about Jay-Z being canceled, which, by the way, I'm so I'm tickled in a weird way that cancel culture has become the sort of catch-all phrase for what's going on now in the culture at large. But you talk about Jay-Z working with the NFL, and he was called a sellout, and sort of he didn't have Colin Kaepernick's back. What are your thoughts about cancel culture today? We've just seen a couple of really major comedians take aim at it. I think they were direct hits. I see some small signs of progress, but from your perspective, do you think there's a pendulum shift moment going on, or are we not really there yet?
I wonder if just being on Twitter, we don't see more of it. I think like a lot of things on Twitter are just so amplified, and we see, thousands of comments where the regular person walking around doesn't see that. Mm-hmm. And so I wonder if we're just more susceptible to seeing cancel culture. But I I don't think it's getting better. I think if anything, it's going to get worse first. Because I don't think that it's spread to the masses yet. I think it's more like an online phenomenon. And, where I see it spilling over is where the pressure on like advertisers, for example, to not advertise during certain shows or that kind of thing. I think comedians are going to be facing that in a bigger way. I think, like, for example, Netflix is going to be pressured to not have the Dave Chappelle's of the world be able to be on their platform. And what will be interesting is to see what Netflix does about that. Will they agree and take the pressure and not show anything super controversial like that? Or will they say, well, we have a market for everything and this is part of that?
Yeah.
And
I think we would have seen Netflix buckle already. I suspect they're going to hang tough for now. But, well, yeah, there's often a cumulative effect, and maybe they're making decisions behind the scenes that we're not even aware of, where Dave Chappelle's run of specials will suddenly magically dry up, but we'll see. One of the things that I think about cancel culture is, to me, it's not about making the world a better place. It's about power. And I was kind of curious if you agree with that, and if so, maybe expand on it, because I think you have a better take than I do on it.
Well, I think for one thing, you're right. It is absolutely about power. It's about making people fall into line and say that this is the way it has to be. You have to agree with me on everything, and you have to agree with me in this exact way. Otherwise, you're at risk of being canceled. I think the Jay-Z one is a really good example because, in general, he agrees with the people who were criticizing him. He was a big Colin Kaepernick fan. He thinks the NFL did do some things wrong in the past. But he's saying, okay, we protested. They heard us. Now they want to move forward and implement some things that we agree with. And the cancelers are saying, well, no, we can't, because Kaepernick doesn't have a job yet. And he's saying, well, isn't this bigger than Kaepernick having a job? Why does Kaepernick need to play football? He can go do any number of things. He's the spokesperson for Nike. It's not like he's not making any money. It's just he might not be able to play football specifically. And for Jay-Z to say that, it's the most obvious argument ever, and yet he got such tremendous pushback for it by people saying that he had abandoned Kaepernick or not cared about what happened to him, and that's just false and just incorrect.
Yeah. One note about this, I think conservatives are fairly split, although maybe there's a shift here. We hate cancel culture. We hate the idea behind it. We just think it's a horrible notion. But there are an increasing number of conservatives, and I have to include myself in that group, that want more of it, because only if people on the left feel its wrath will something good happen. Are you in that camp? I mean, it's a complicated issue, but
it is complicated. I'd rather not get people fired for things that they say or do. And especially, I think that there's also, there's a divide in cancel culture. There's a couple of different kind of subsects of it. And it could be, the one that I really think needs to end is when somebody hits the national stage or becomes prominent in some way, and then somebody else digs through their old tweets and finds something that they said that would be cancelable. I think that's the one that I really can't stand. And I think that most people would agree with that. But on the other hand, there's like the situation where a leftist professor tweeted that he wishes his opponents who don't believe in gun control, he wishes their kids were dead. He might have said that in the heat of the moment. He might have tweeted that. A serious apology would be maybe sufficient. But that's not really cancel culture. That's you said something that is so deeply inappropriate that your work doesn't want you around anymore. And that's something very different. I think when we're looking at digging through somebody's decade-old tweets versus somebody saying that they wish their opponent's kids are dead, those are two different things. So we shouldn't lump them into one cancel culture thing because, yes, people are going to get fired for saying insane things like that. The most recent example, though, the professor who had said some anti-American stuff, I don't think he should be fired. I think that he should be held accountable with more words. People should argue with him. It should be more of that. And listen, if every anti-American professor was fired, I'm not sure we'd have any left. So...
Be a lot of job openings, apparently. But, one of the things that, you're a columnist, you're not a film producer or a record maker, but the conversation that often comes up on the right is about Hollywood and pop culture and what do we do? They don't want to put on a right of center talk show. That's kind of a complicated issue, but it doesn't exist, and it would to me, it would clean up, but they won't do it.
Oh.
If you make a pro-life movie, it'll jump through 1,000 hoops before it gets to a theater near you. What do you think that people on the right, especially people who have talent and artistry, what should they be doing right now? I mean, do they have to make polemics in the guise of movies? What's the next step?
It's amazing that we can't have a single right of center late night guy. It's crazy because I think it was Charles Krauthammer, who said Fox News discovered a niche market, half the country. That's where we are right now with this late night, market. Obviously, when you have like 3 guys or 4 guys who are all left of center and you put on one that's going to be right of center, he's going to get an avalanche of viewers. Like, let's try that. Let's see what happens. But they won't. And I think another thing is that they would only do it with somebody like, which I feel like I'm pretty libertarian, but I think that they would only even risk that maybe with like a libertarian-y kind of person. And I really think a conservative would do better because there already are libertarian comedians. You see Dennis Miller, you see Greg Gutfeld. But I'd love to see some actual conservatives in a comedic role on TV. I think that would really be interesting and different. And, the Roseanne show was so popular while it lasted, not because she's a conservative, which she's not, but because she showed conservatives as sort of normal people. And I don't think you get to see a lot of that on TV, and that would really work.
Yeah, that was really an amazing moment in the culture where I think it was 18 or 20 million people showed up, in part because they love the show, but in part because the buzz on it was, hey, they're going to give conservatives a fair shake. Red State America won't be insulted for a change. And that alone was enough to make the...
And more importantly, it was hilarious. I thought it was so clever and funny. There were so many parts about it that still stick out to me. Like when Jackie admitted that she voted for Jill, what was the green? Yeah, Jill Stein. That was that was classic. we all have some crazy leftist friend who got confused and voted for Jill Stein in 2000. She represented that. There was so many funny moments in that show.
Well, what's your take on President Trump and the culture wars? There's a part of me that cheers when he gets involved with it, and then I cringe when he does it in a very kind of blunt way and doesn't have his facts lined up. Does the right have to kind of reluctantly rally around him, or do we kind of go to like a Dave Rubin who's creating his own platforms and really being open and liberal in the very best sense of the word?
I think that conservatives or any Republican will always be accused of fighting the culture wars. I mean, I think George W. Bush was accused of that, and now looking back, obviously he really didn't. I don't know. I often wish Trump would not speak out against different things. Like, I didn't like him speaking out on the kneeling. I thought that much better arguments were being made against kneeling in the NFL apart from Trump. And I think he just sort of exacerbated the problem and the divide between us, which I really wish he wouldn't do. But obviously that's sort of his brand. There's some things about him that I understand why it appeals to people. I mentioned today that on Twitter that, I was a really big Paul Ryan fan, but Joe Biden kind of got the better of him in that debate. And it's hard to imagine Joe Biden being a great debater. And people said, well, Paul Ryan sort of took his attacks and didn't fight back. And of course, Trump is the ultimate and he fights. So I see why people like that he doesn't just accept the slings from the left and quietly, fade away. He does fight back, and people seem to really like that.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's the but he fights which I kind of used against him during the primaries. I was as flustered as many conservatives were about him, but now there's a part of me that just really rallies around that. One last question. You kind of said that the cancel culture isn't going away, and it's sort of stuck with us for a while, but are there any optimistic signs across the culture, from political aspirations to even just Hollywood, that you can look to and say, hey, this is a good thing. We can kind of rally around this, and maybe this will expand in 2020 and beyond?
Well, I think what the comedians that you mentioned, Dave Chappelle, Bill Burr, and Aziz Ansari, and the fact that they all kind of challenged cancel culture. I don't know that much about Burr, but Ansari and Chappelle are liberals. They're not conservatives. And I think something different is happening in culture because of canceling. I think a lot of people have had enough of being told what they can say, what they can't say, and that they have to say everything exactly the right way. Otherwise, they're just removed from the public life forever. So I think that there's some positives coming out from the comedy left, and I hope that they permeate culture all around, and that people see that, that there's some positives to being able to speak the way you want to and not be policed by these cancelers. So that's my positive moment.
Yeah, and I'll end on a quick note, and it's because they got bit that they kind of turned around. But Sarah Silverman and Jim Gaffigan have both spoken out. They're definitely left of center. I think Sarah's aggressively left, where Jim is sort of center left. But each of them been very vocal in recent weeks, and we need more of that. We need more people that doesn't matter what the ideology is, like the Ricky Gervaises of the world, to say, hey, enough is enough. But one way we can say enough is enough by reading your columns. Thank you for joining the HitCast, Karol. You can read her great work at the New York Post and Real Clear Politics. And, of course, track her on social media. She's at Karol, Karol, short, sweet, and simple. Karol, thanks so much for joining the show, and hopefully we can talk again.
Thank you for having me.
Well, thanks again for listening. Don't forget to check out HollywoodandToto.com for both the show notes and, of course, the latest entertainment news. Please follow me at Twitter at HollywoodandToto. And we'd love it if you leave a podcast review over at iTunes. See you next week.